The distress signal came at 0600 hours, and Captain Jiwan knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. She stood on the bridge of the Coalition defense vessel, Harmony's Light, staring at the communication panel as static-filled screams poured through the speakers. Behind those screams, she could hear explosions, the distinct sound of energy weapons firing, and something else that made her blood run cold, children crying. "Captain, it's Haven Rest Colony," her communications officer Suman said, her face pale. "They're under attack." Jiwan had served in the Coalition Defense Fleet for 15 years. In all that time, she had never heard anything like this. The Coalition had been at peace for 2,000 years. Wars were things from history books, carefully regulated conflicts that ended with arbitration and treaties. Nobody actually died anymore. Nobody screamed like this. "Who's attacking them?" Jiwan asked. "The Vakri Dominion, ma'am," replied her tactical officer Dongwon. "They're not part of the Coalition. They came from beyond the Outer Rim." Jiwan watched her screen as data streamed in from Haven Rest. The colony had 8.4 million residents from 12 different species. They had no military defenses because they didn't need any. The Coalition protected everyone. That was the whole point. "Send a priority alert to the High Council," Jiwan ordered. "Tell them we need immediate authorization to intervene." Suman worked her console, then looked up with confusion on her face. "Ma'am, the Council says we need to file a formal request. They need to review it." "Review it?" Jiwan couldn't believe what she was hearing. "There are millions of people dying down there right now." "I know, ma'am. But protocol requires..." Another scream cut through the bridge, louder than before. Then the transmission from Haven Rest cut off completely. Only static remained. Jiwan spent the next 3 days trying to get authorization to help Haven Rest. She filed reports, attended emergency sessions, and pleaded with anyone who would listen. But the Coalition moved slowly. It had to. Peace required careful consideration, proper procedure, unanimous consent from all member species. Council member Hyunwoo explained it to her during one session. He was a patient man who had served the Coalition for 40 years. "Captain Jiwan, I understand your frustration, but we cannot simply rush into military action. We have laws. We have procedures. These things exist to prevent us from becoming the monsters we once were. But people are dying," Jiwan said. "Yes, and that is tragic. But if we abandon our principles, we become no better than the Vakri. The Council will make a decision soon. Trust the process." On the 4th day, the final transmission came from Haven Rest. It was just 10 seconds long. A child's voice, small and frightened. "Is anyone coming to help us?" Then silence. Forever. Jiwan stood in her quarters that night, staring out at the stars. 8.4 million people, all dead, and the Coalition had done nothing but debate and discuss and follow procedure. She felt sick. That's when she started searching the archives. If the Coalition couldn't help, maybe someone else could. She dug through old files, restricted databases, and classified documents. Most captains wouldn't have the clearance. But Jiwan had friends in intelligence who owed her favors. She found it buried in a section marked Quarantine Protocols. A single species, isolated from the rest of the galaxy for 400 years. The reason for their isolation made her hands shake as she read. Humanity. The Terrans. They had been part of the Coalition once. But they had been expelled for excessive military aggression, failure to comply with warfare regulations, and barbaric conduct during conflicts. The official record said they were too dangerous, too violent, too willing to fight. Jiwan read deeper. She found battle reports from human conflicts. The numbers were staggering. In one incident, a Terran fleet of 20 ships had destroyed an enemy armada of 300. The Coalition observers had been horrified by the tactics used. Ambushes, psychological warfare, weapons designed purely to kill rather than disable. The Coalition had voted to remove humanity from civilized space. The Terrans had accepted the decision without protest. They had returned to their home system, and an exclusion zone was established. Any ship that entered the Sol system would be destroyed. Any Coalition member who contacted the Terrans faced execution. 400 years had passed since then. No one knew what humanity had been doing in all that time. Some species thought they had probably destroyed themselves. Others believed they were still out there, evolving their weapons and tactics in isolation. Jiwan made her decision that night. She knew it would cost her everything. Her career, her honor, probably her life. But she couldn't let another Haven Rest happen. She wouldn't. She called Dongwon and Suman to her quarters. They arrived within minutes, sensing the urgency in her voice. I'm going to break quarantine, Jiwan told them. I'm going to the Sol system to find the humans. Suman's eyes went wide. Captain, that's a death sentence. For all of us, I know. That's why I'm going alone. You two need to— No, Dongwon interrupted. If you're going, we're going with you. This isn't your burden to carry, Jiwan said. Yes, it is, Suman replied quietly. We all heard those screams from Haven Rest. We all watched the council do nothing. If there's even a chance the humans can help, we have to try. 2 hours later, they slipped away from the fleet in a small stealth vessel. Jiwan had filed reports saying they were conducting a routine survey mission. It would buy them maybe 3 days before anyone noticed they were gone. The journey to the Sol system took 5 days of hard travel. As they approached the boundary of the exclusion zone, Jiwan felt her heart pounding. This was it. No turning back now. We're crossing into restricted space, Dongwon announced. Any response? Jiwan asked. Nothing yet, wait. I'm getting multiple contacts. Ships are appearing all around us. The view screen lit up with dozens of vessels. They were unlike anything in Coalition databases. Angular, heavily armored, covered in weapons that looked brutal and efficient. These were not ships built for exploration or peaceful trade. These were warships. A communication channel opened. A male voice spoke in perfect Coalition standard. Unidentified vessel, you have violated quarantine. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. Jiwan took a deep breath and opened the channel. This is Captain Jiwan of the Coalition Defense Fleet. I'm here to speak with whoever commands your forces. It's urgent. There was a long pause. Then, stand by. The Terran ships surrounded them, and Jiwan knew that her fate, and perhaps the fate of the entire Coalition, now rested in the hands of the monsters they had banished 4 centuries ago. The Terran boarding party arrived within the hour. 6 soldiers in heavy armor that made them look more like machines than living beings. They moved through Jiwan's small ship with practiced efficiency, checking every corner, every system, every possible hiding place. The leader removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face with hard eyes. I'm Commander Tajan of the Terran Defense Force. You've got about 5 minutes to explain why we shouldn't throw you into a cell and forget about you. Jiwan stood straight despite her fear. Commander, I need your help. The Coalition needs your help. Tajan laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Coalition? The same Coalition that kicked us out 400 years ago? The same one that told us we were too violent, too barbaric, too dangerous to be around civilized species? That Coalition? Yes, Jiwan said simply. That Coalition. Give me one good reason why we should care about anything happening to you people. Jiwan pulled up the recordings from Haven Rest on her datapad. She didn't say anything. She just played them. The screams, the explosions, the child's last question. She played all of it. Tajan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. When the recordings ended, he was quiet for a long moment. How many dead? 8.4 million, an entire colony world. And the Coalition's response? They debated for 3 days. By the time they made a decision, everyone was already dead. Tajan nodded slowly. That sounds about right. They always were good at talking. Not so good at doing. He looked at his soldiers. Take them to Earth. The President will want to hear this. The journey to Earth took another 6 hours. Jiwan pressed her face against the viewport, staring at humanity's home system. It looked nothing like she expected. The planets were surrounded by orbital stations, defense platforms, and more warships than she could count. The asteroid belt had been turned into massive shipyards. The humans had been busy. Earth itself was beautiful, blue and green and white, hanging in the darkness like a jewel. Jiwan had seen many worlds, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was knowing that this was where humanity had been born, where they had been forced to return after the Coalition rejected them. They were brought to a facility on the surface, in a city called Sol. The building was old but well-maintained, with guards at every entrance. Inside, they were led to a conference room where several people waited. President Yuna sat at the head of the table. She was younger than Jiwan expected, maybe 50 years old, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Beside her sat Admiral Tajan, who Jiwan realized must be related to Commander Tajan. Others filled the remaining seats: generals, advisors, politicians. Captain Jiwan, President Yuna said, "You've taken a significant risk coming here. The penalty for breaking quarantine is death. You know this?" Yes, Madam President. Yet you came anyway. Admiral Tajin tells me you brought recordings. I'd like to see them. Jiwan played the Haven Rest recordings again. This time, she watched the humans' faces as they listened. Some looked angry. Others looked sad. A few showed no emotion at all, but their hands clenched into fists. When it ended, President Yuna sat back in her chair. 4 million souls, an entire colony, wiped out while the Coalition discussed proper procedure. Tell me, Captain, why should we help the Coalition? They threw us away like garbage. Because it's the right thing to do, Jiwan said. I know what the Coalition did to your people was wrong. I know we have no right to ask for your help. But those people on Haven Rest didn't make the decision to expel you. Most of them weren't even alive 400 years ago. They were just innocent people trying to live their lives, and they died because the Coalition forgot how to fight. General Kibum, a stern man with gray hair, spoke up. So now that you need warriors, you come running back to the monsters you expelled. That's convenient. Yes, Jiwan admitted. It is, and I'm ashamed of that. But my shame doesn't matter. What matters is that the Vakri are still out there, and they're going to attack more colonies. More millions will die. The Coalition can't stop them, but maybe you can. And if we do help, President Yuna asked, what happens after? Do we go back to being quarantined? Do we save the Coalition and then get locked away again because we make people uncomfortable? I don't know, Jiwan said honestly. I'm just a captain. I don't make policy, but I do know that if the Coalition is going to survive, it needs to change. And maybe seeing what you can do will force that change. The room fell silent. Ambassador Yunji, a diplomatic-looking woman, leaned forward. Madam President, if I may, the captain makes a valid point. This could be our opportunity. Not for revenge, but for redemption. We could show the galaxy that we're not monsters. We're just people who are good at something they've forgotten how to do. Or we could show them exactly why they were right to fear us, General Kibum countered. 400 years we've been preparing. Our weapons, our tactics, our entire military doctrine has evolved without any restrictions. If we deploy our forces, the galaxy will see what humanity has become in isolation. That might terrify them more than the Vakri. Admiral Tajin spoke for the first time. They're already terrified, General. That's why they came to us. The question isn't whether we're scary. The question is whether we're going to let millions die just to prove a point. President Yuna looked at each person around the table, then back at Jiwan. Captain, I need to discuss this with my cabinet, but I want you to understand something. If we agree to help, we do it our way. No coalition oversight, no restrictions on our tactics, no questioning our methods. We've spent 400 years learning how to win wars. You don't get to tell us how to fight. I understand, Jiwan said, do you? Tajin stood and walked to a wall display, bringing up tactical data. Look at this. This is a standard coalition military engagement from your database. 2 fleets meet. Exchange fire at long range, attempt to disable rather than destroy. The whole thing takes 3 days and ends with maybe a dozen casualties. Then everyone goes to arbitration. He pulled up different data. This is a Terran engagement from 350 years ago. Same fleet sizes. Battle lasted 47 minutes. 90% casualties on the enemy side. No survivors were taken because we needed to send a message. That's how we fight. That's who we are. Jiwan felt cold. I understand. I don't think you do, Tajin said quietly. But you will. If we agree to this, you're going to see things that will haunt you. You're going to watch us do things that violate every coalition law about warfare, and you're going to have to live with the fact that you asked us to do it. President Yuna stood. We'll have a decision in 24 hours. Until then, Captain Jiwan, you and your crew will remain as our guests. I suggest you use the time to think very carefully about what you're asking for. That night, Jiwan couldn't sleep. She walked the halls of the facility, escorted by guards who kept a respectful distance. She found a window overlooking the city. Seoul was beautiful at night, lights stretching to the horizon. Suman found her there.
Captain?
Are you okay? I don't know, Jiwan admitted. I keep thinking about what Admiral Tajin said, about what we're going to see if they agree to help. Am I making a terrible mistake? More people will die if we do nothing, Suman said. That's not a mistake. That's just death. But what if the cure is worse than the disease? What if we unleash something we can't control? Then we deal with it. But at least people will be alive to deal with it. The next morning, President Yuna called them back to the conference room. Her expression was unreadable as Jiwan and her crew entered. We've made our decision, President Yuna said. We'll help. But understand this, Captain. We're not doing this for the Coalition. We're doing this because innocent people are dying. There's a difference. Thank you, Jiwan whispered. Don't thank me yet, President Yuna replied. You haven't seen us fight. The Terran Expeditionary Force assembled in 48 hours. Jiwan stood on the observation deck of the carrier Indomitable, watching as 15 warships prepared for departure. Only 15. Her heart sank. That's your fleet? She asked Commodore Sang-hoon, who would be leading the operation. That's all we need, he replied calmly. The Vakri field fleets of hundreds of ships. You'll be outnumbered 20-1. Sang-hoon smiled slightly. Good, if there were more of them, it would be boring. Jiwan didn't know if he was joking. She suspected he wasn't. The journey to Coalition space took 6 days. During that time, Jiwan watched the Terran crew prepare. They moved with a precision she had never seen before. Every action had a purpose. Every drill was executed flawlessly. These weren't just soldiers. They were weapons that happened to be shaped like people. Dongwon spent most of his time studying Terran tactical displays. Captain, their weapon systems are incredible. Half of them are banned by coalition warfare treaties. I know, Jiwan said. And their combat doctrine. They don't follow any of the accepted rules of engagement. They treat war like hunting. I know, Jiwan repeated quietly. On the 7th day, they received a distress call. Another colony, New Haven, was under Vakri attack. It had only begun an hour ago, which meant there was still time to save people. Sang-hoon didn't hesitate. All ships' battle stations. We're going in. Shouldn't we coordinate with coalition forces? Jiwan asked. No time. Besides, we work better alone. The Terran fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Haven system. Jiwan's sensors immediately lit up with contacts. 12 Vakri warships were bombarding the colony. They were massive things, each one larger than 3 coalition vessels combined. They've seen us, Dongwon reported. They're breaking off their attack and forming up. Good, Sang-hoon said. Fire. What happened next was nothing like any battle Jiwan had ever witnessed. There were no hails, no attempts at communication, no ritual challenges. The Terran ships simply opened fire. The weapons they used were terrifying. Missiles that moved faster than anything in coalition arsenals. Energy beams that burned through shields like they weren't there. Kinetic rounds that hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. One Vakri cruiser exploded in the first 30 seconds. Another lost all power and began drifting. The remaining Vakri ships tried to return fire, but the Terran vessels moved in ways that seemed impossible, dodging and weaving through space like fighters rather than capital ships. How are they doing that? Dongwon breathed. Inertial dampeners, Sang-hoon explained calmly, as if they weren't in the middle of a battle. Coalition ships limit them to prevent crew injury during combat. We turned ours up to maximum. It's uncomfortable, but it keeps you alive. A Vakri ship managed to land a hit on one of the Terran destroyers. The shields held, but barely. Jiwan saw the damage indicators flash red. Destroyer Defiant reports moderate damage, a communications officer announced. Tell them to fall back and effect repairs, Sang-hoon ordered. Then he turned to his weapons officer. Target that Vakri ship, all batteries. Turn it into debris. The Terran fleet concentrated fire. In 10 seconds, the Vakri ship simply ceased to exist. There was no wreckage, no survivors, just an expanding cloud of vapor where a warship had been. The remaining Vakri ships broke formation and tried to flee. They didn't make it. The Terran vessels pursued them ruthlessly, destroying each one before it could escape to faster-than-light speeds. The entire battle lasted 9 minutes. Jiwan stood in stunned silence, staring at the tactical display. 12 Vakri warships destroyed. 0 Terran losses except for minor damage to 1 destroyer. In 9 minutes, get me a damage report from the colony, Sang-hoon ordered. Colony reports minimal casualties, Suman said, tears streaming down her face. We got here in time. The shields held. They're safe. For the first time, Sang-hoon smiled genuinely. Good. That's what we came here to do. But the Vakri weren't done. Word of the engagement spread quickly. The Vakri warlord Thexel was not a creature accustomed to defeat. He sent a message that the Terrans intercepted. So the coalition has found new warriors. Thexel's voice was deep and menacing. These Terrans. I look forward to crushing them. Send the 3rd battle group. 60 ships should be sufficient. Sang-hoon listened to the message and laughed. 60 ships. He thinks 60 ships is sufficient. I'm almost insulted. What are you going to do? Jiwan asked. We're going to teach the Vakri a lesson about assumptions. The third battle group arrived 2 days later, expecting to find the Terran fleet waiting for them. Instead, they found nothing. The Terran ships had scattered across the sector. I don't understand, Jiwan said. Why aren't we concentrating our forces? Because we're not trying to win a battle, Sang-hoon explained. We're trying to win a war. And wars aren't won by fighting fair. They're won by breaking your enemy's will to fight. Over the next week, the Terran ships struck like ghosts. A supply depot would explode. A communications relay would go dark. A patrol group would vanish without sending a distress signal. The Vakri never saw them coming. Commander Minjae led a squadron of fighters that specialized in hit-and-run attacks. They would appear, destroy their target, and vanish before the Vakri could respond. Jiwan watched one engagement where Minjae's squadron took out an entire supply convoy in under 3 minutes. How did you do that? Jiwan asked later. Minjae shrugged. We studied your records of Vakri tactics. They're predictable. They always put their supply ships in the center of the formation, thinking the escorts will protect them. So we came in from below, where they don't expect attacks, hit the escorts with missiles first, then the supply ships. By the time they figured out what was happening, we were gone. The Terrans also employed weapons that made Jiwan uncomfortable. Cyber warfare specialist Heejin showed her one example. We hacked into their communications network, she explained. Now we can hear everything they say to each other. And occasionally we send our own messages. What kind of messages? False orders. Fake casualty reports. Sometimes we just broadcast screams. The psychological effect is devastating. They don't trust their own communications anymore. Jiwan struggled for words. That's cruel. Yes, Heejin agreed. But it saves lives. If the Vakri are too scared and confused to fight effectively, we can beat them with fewer casualties on both sides. War isn't noble, Captain. It's ugly. We just accept that ugliness instead of pretending it doesn't exist. By the end of 2 weeks, the Vakri 3rd Battle Group was in shambles. They had lost 30 ships without ever engaging the Terran fleet directly. Thexel was furious. Find them. His intercepted communications screamed. I don't care how. Find them and destroy them. Sang-hoon gathered his fleet commanders for a meeting. Jiwan was allowed to attend. The Vakri are getting desperate, Sang-hoon said. That means they're about to do something stupid. They'll probably commit even more ships. We're already outnumbered, one of the captains pointed out. Yes, but we're smarter. And we're meaner. The question is, do we want to keep bleeding them slowly or do we want to end this? What did you have in mind? Captain Soo-hyun asked. Sang-hoon smiled and Jiwan felt a chill run down her spine. It was the smile of a predator about to strike. We're going to give them exactly what they want, Sang-hoon said. We're going to give them a pitched battle. And we're going to show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. The message went out to all Vakri forces, broadcast on every channel. This is Commodore Sang-hoon of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You wanted a fight. You've got one. We'll be waiting at the ruins of Haven Rest Colony. Come and get us. Jiwan stared at him in horror. You're using Haven Rest as bait? The place where 8.4 million people died? Yes, Sang-hoon said quietly. Because I want the Vakri to understand something. That place represents the Coalition's failure. When we defend it, when we turn it into the Vakri's graveyard, we're going to show the galaxy that those deaths weren't meaningless. We're going to avenge them. The Terran fleet set course for Haven Rest, and Jiwan realized she was about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The ruins of Haven Rest Colony hung in space like a graveyard. Dead orbital stations, scattered debris, and the scorched remains of evacuation ships drifted silently. Jiwan had to look away from the view screen. Too many bodies. Too many small bodies. This is where we make our stand, Sang-hoon announced to the fleet. Deploy all defensive platforms. I want mines in a sphere around the planet, fighters on standby, and someone get me a line to the colony surface. Sir, there's no one alive down there, a communications officer said quietly. I know, but there are 8.4 million graves. I want to tell them they're about to be avenged. The Terran fleet consisted of 15 warships. They arranged themselves in a formation that made no sense to Jiwan. Coalition tactics called for a defensive sphere, each ship supporting the others. But the Terran ships spread out, creating gaps that seemed like vulnerabilities. Commodore, your formation has holes, Jiwan pointed out. Those aren't holes, Sang-hoon replied. They're traps. The Vakri response was overwhelming. Supreme Commander Velnoth himself led the Grand Armada. 800 warships representing the full military might of the Vakri Dominion. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in waves, their numbers blotting out the stars. Dongwon's hands shook as he read the sensors. Captain, there are so many. How can 15 ships possibly? Watch and learn, Sang-hoon interrupted. All ships, this is Commodore Sang-hoon. Today we fight not for territory or resources. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We fight to show the galaxy that evil has consequences. And we fight to prove that sometimes monsters are exactly what the universe needs. All batteries fire at will. The battle began at dawn, measured by the colony's destroyed orbital position. The Vakri came in confidently, expecting to simply overwhelm the Terran fleet through sheer numbers. They learned their mistake in the first 60 seconds. The gaps in the Terran formation were actually kill zones. As Vakri ships pushed through, Terran vessels on either side concentrated their fire, destroying dozens of enemy ships in seconds. When the Vakri tried to regroup, they found they had flown into a minefield that had been carefully hidden from their sensors. Explosions blossomed throughout the Vakri formation. Ships collided with each other, trying to avoid the mines. The careful order of their Grand Armada dissolved into chaos. All fighters launch, Sang-hoon ordered. Commander Minjae led the fighter squadrons personally. But these weren't ordinary fighters. They were mixed with drones, hundreds of them. All slave to the manned fighters' control systems. What are those? Ji-won asked. Suicide drones, Sang-hoon explained. Each one carries a small nuclear device. They're designed to get through shields and detonate inside enemy ships, and that's... Ji-won couldn't finish. The tactic was brutal, effective, and utterly merciless. Minjae's voice came over the communications. All wings follow my lead. Targets are the capital ships. Drones go first, we follow and finish anything still moving. The drones swarmed forward like a plague. Vakri Point Defense tried to stop them, but there were too many. For every drone destroyed, 3 got through. They slammed into shields, sacrificing themselves to overload the defensive systems. Then the manned fighters came behind them, firing missiles and energy weapons into the gaps the drones had created. A Vakri battleship, one of the largest ships in their fleet, took 17 drone strikes in 30 seconds. Its shields collapsed. Minjae and her pilots poured fire into the exposed hull. The battleship broke apart, debris spinning away in all directions. But the Terrans were paying a price too. Ji-won watched in horror as 3 Terran fighters were destroyed by Vakri defensive fire. Real people gone in flashes of light. We have casualties, she whispered. Yes, Sang-hoon said grimly. We do. War has a cost, Captain. The difference is we're willing to pay it. On the surface of Haven Rest, Marine Commander Soo-hyun led a different kind of operation. Her forces had set up concealed positions among the ruins of the colony. When Vakri ships moved into low orbit to bombard the Terran fleet from below, they found themselves under fire from ground-based weapons. Massive railguns, hidden in destroyed buildings, fired solid slugs of metal at near-light speed. They punched through Vakri shields like they didn't exist. 2 destroyers lost orbit and crashed into the planet's surface. But Soo-hyun's mission had a second objective. Several damaged Vakri ships had lost power and were drifting. She launched boarding parties. Ji-won listened to the radio traffic from the boarding actions and felt sick. It wasn't combat as the coalition understood it. The Terran Marines moved through Vakri ships like death itself, clearing room after room with terrifying efficiency. They took no prisoners. They couldn't afford to. All life support disabled on Vakri cruiser Zex Prime, Soo-hyun reported. The ship is ours. We're turning it around. Confirmed, Sang-hoon replied. Use it against them. The captured Vakri ship, now crewed by a skeleton team of Terran Marines, opened fire on its own fleet. The confusion this caused was immediate and devastating. Vakri ships hesitated, unsure which targets were enemies. In that moment of hesitation, the Terran fleet struck. Cyber warfare specialist Heejin had been working throughout the battle. Now her efforts paid off. Commodore, I've cracked their fleet coordination network. I can see all their communications. Can you disrupt them? Better. I can make them see whatever we want. Heejin went to work. Suddenly, Vakri sensors showed dozens of Terran reinforcement fleets arriving. The signals looked real, complete with proper identification codes. Panic spread through the Vakri ranks. Some ships tried to flee. Others held position, waiting for orders that were being scrambled by Terran electronic warfare. Supreme Commander Velnoth tried to maintain order, but his own communications were being disrupted. Half his fleet couldn't hear his orders. The other half was receiving contradictory commands that Heejin was broadcasting. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessel, Sang-hoon ordered. Take out Velnoth. Every Terran ship turned its weapons on the Valkyrie flagship. The massive vessel's shields were powerful, designed to withstand sustained bombardment, but they weren't designed to withstand this. The Terrans didn't aim for the hull. They aimed for the shield generators. One by one, the generators overloaded and exploded. The flagship's shields collapsed in sections, leaving parts of the hull exposed. Terran missiles found those gaps and exploited them ruthlessly. The flagship began to break apart. Emergency pods ejected, carrying the crew to safety. Except Velnoth's pod. A Terran destroyer specifically targeted it with a precision laser strike. That's a war crime, Ji-won said numbly. He was escaping. The battle was over for him. No, Sang-hoon replied coldly. He ordered the massacre of Havenrest. He killed 8.4 million people who never had a chance to fight back. He doesn't get to escape. He doesn't get to live. That's justice, not a war crime. With their commander dead and their formation shattered, the Valkyrie fleet broke completely. Ships fled in all directions, abandoning their slower vessels. The Terran fleet pursued them like wolves chasing wounded prey. By the time Sang-hoon ordered a ceasefire, 600 Valkyrie ships had been destroyed or disabled. The Grand Armada, the pride of the Valkyrie Dominion, had been annihilated. The Terran fleet had lost 5 ships, 2 destroyers, 2 frigates, and 1 corvette. 370 Terran personnel had died. Ji-won knew their names would be remembered, honored, carved into memorials back on Earth. Sang-hoon opened a channel that broadcast across all frequencies, to every ship in the sector, to every planet in Coalition space, and deep into Valkyrie territory. This is Commodore Sang-hoon of the Terran Expeditionary Force. To the Valkyrie Dominion, hear this message and understand it well. You came to this sector of space seeking conquest. You massacred innocent people who could not defend themselves. You thought there would be no consequences. He paused, looking at the debris field that had once been the Valkyrie Grand Armada. You were wrong. The Coalition called us monsters, and perhaps they were right. But we are monsters who protect the innocent. We are monsters who avenge the dead. We are monsters who will hunt you across the stars if you ever return to this space. Another pause. You wanted mercy. We gave you the only mercy monsters know. We ended you quickly. If you return, we will not be so kind. This sector is under Terran protection now. Leave and never come back. The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge. Ji-won looked at the tactical display, showing the ruins of both the Valkyrie fleet and Havenrest colony. She had asked for help. She had begged for mercy for her people, and the Terrans had delivered that mercy in blood and fire. She wondered if the galaxy would ever forgive her for what she had unleashed. She wondered if she would ever forgive herself. But when she looked at the readings from the colony world below, at the mass graves of 8.4 million souls, she knew the answer, yes, because they had been avenged, and because no one would ever massacre a helpless colony again, not while the Terran monsters stood watch. Ji-won returned to Coalition space 3 weeks after the Battle of Havenrest. She expected to be arrested immediately. Instead, she found chaos. Her ship was met by a dozen Coalition vessels, but they didn't attack. They escorted her to the Coalition High Council chambers on the capital world of Nexus Prime. As she walked through the corridors, she saw things she had never seen before. Protesters, both for and against humanity, news crews everywhere, council members arguing openly instead of in private sessions. The galaxy had watched the battle. Someone had leaked the footage, every minute of it. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds had witnessed what the Terrans could do. Council member Hyunwoo met her before the trial. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Captain Ji-won, what have you done? He asked, not unkindly. I saved lives, she replied. You unleashed humanity. Do you understand what that means? We spent 400 years keeping them contained, keeping the galaxy safe from their way of war. Now everyone has seen what they can do. Everyone has also seen what happens when we refuse to fight. Havenrest died because we were too afraid to act. And how many Valkyrie died at Havenrest? Hyunwoo asked. 600 ships, tens of thousands of lives. The Terrans slaughtered them. The Valkyrie started it. The Terrans ended it. I'd rather have that than watch more colonies burn. The trial began the next day. Ji-won, Dongwon, and Sumin stood before the entire High Council. The charges were read: breaking quarantine, unauthorized contact with a restricted species, and endangering the peace and stability of the coalition. The penalty for each charge was death. Hyunwoo led the prosecution. Captain Jiwon made a choice that was not hers to make. She violated laws that have kept the coalition peaceful for millennia. Yes, her intentions were good. Yes, lives were saved. But the cost is that we now have humanity back among us, and they are more dangerous than ever. He pulled up footage from the battle: Valkyrie ships exploding, Terran fighters sacrificing themselves, Marines boarding enemy vessels, cyber warfare that violated every treaty. This is what she brought back to us. This is what she unleashed. Warfare that recognizes no limits, no boundaries, no mercy. The Terrans fought like animals, like monsters, and Captain Jiwon gave them permission to do so in our space. Then it was Jiwon's turn to speak. She stood alone, facing the council. Council member Hyunwoo is right. I broke your laws. I contacted humanity. I asked them for help. And yes, they fought like monsters. But those monsters saved millions of lives. They avenged 8.4 million deaths. They stopped an enemy that we couldn't stop. She paused, gathering her courage. The Valkyrie are still out there. They're weakened, but they exist. And there are others like them. Predators who don't respect our laws or our treaties. What happens when they come? Do we debate for 3 days while colonies burn? Do we follow proper procedure while people die? You speak as if war is inevitable, Hyunwoo said. War is always inevitable when one side wants it enough. We forgot that. We built a society based on the hope that everyone would be reasonable, that everyone would follow the rules. But the Valkyrie proved that hope wrong. And humanity showed us what we needed to survive. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members wanted Jiwon executed as an example. Others wanted to give her a medal. The coalition was splitting down the middle. Then President Yuna of Earth requested permission to address the council. It was the first time a human leader had stood before them in 400 years. Yuna appeared on the main view screen, broadcasting from Earth. She looked calm, professional, and absolutely unyielding. Members of the coalition, I am President Yuna of the Terran Federation. 400 years ago, you expelled my people because we were too violent, too willing to fight, too dangerous to be around. You were right. We are all of those things. Murmurs spread through the council chambers. But you called us back, Yuna continued. When you needed warriors, when you needed monsters, when you needed someone willing to do what you could not, you called us. And we came. Not because we owe you anything. Not because we've forgotten what you did to us. We came because people were dying and we could stop it. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. Now you have a choice to make. You can execute Captain Jiwon for breaking your laws. You can try to push us back into quarantine. You can pretend that the last 3 weeks didn't happen. But understand this, the galaxy has changed. Everyone has seen what happens when predators attack defenseless prey. And everyone has seen what happens when someone fights back. Are you threatening us? One council member demanded. No, Yuna replied. I'm offering you a choice. You can continue as you were, hoping that peace will protect you. Or you can accept that peace requires the capacity for war. You can accept that sometimes you need monsters on your side. The council debated for another full day. Jiwon waited in a holding cell with Dongwon and Sumin. Do you regret it? Sumin asked quietly. No, Jiwon said. I just wish there had been another way. There wasn't, Dongwon replied. That's the hard part. Sometimes the only choice is between bad options and worse options. The verdict came at midnight. By a vote of 25 to 22, with several abstentions, Jiwon was found guilty of all charges. Then by a vote of 26 to 21, she was pardoned. The council couldn't agree on whether she was a hero or a criminal, so they settled for letting her live. The second vote was more important. By a slim majority, the coalition invited humanity to rejoin as conditional members. The conditions were extensive. Terran military forces would operate separately from coalition defense forces. Human warfare tactics would remain restricted to human personnel. A permanent oversight committee would monitor Terran military activities. But the most important condition was simple. Humanity would serve as the coalition's military force. When diplomacy failed, when threats emerged that the coalition couldn't handle through peaceful means, the Terrans would respond. Admiral Tajin accepted the terms on behalf of Earth, but added one condition of his own. We'll be your monsters. We'll do the fighting you can't do. But never forget that we're people first. Treat us like monsters and we'll leave. Treat us like partners and we'll stand beside you. G1 was assigned a new position, liaison officer between the Coalition and the Terran Federation. It was a diplomatic role, but everyone knew what it really meant. She would be the bridge between two very different civilizations, the person who translated between those who sought peace above all and those who understood that peace sometimes required violence. 6 months later, she stood in a cemetery on Earth. It was a military cemetery outside Seoul, where the 370 Terrans who died at Haven Rest were buried. Each grave had a simple marker with a name, rank, and dates. She found the grave of Lieutenant Dae-hyun, one of the fighter pilots who had died covering Min-jae's escape. He had been 24 years old. Ji-won placed a flower on the grave. Around her, other people did the same. Families, friends, fellow soldiers. They mourned quietly with dignity. President Yuna found her there. Captain Ji-won, I thought I might find you here. I come here often, Ji-won admitted. These people died because I asked for help. No, Yuna corrected gently. They died because evil exists and someone has to fight it. You gave them the chance to mean something, to save lives. That's not a burden you should carry. That's a gift you gave them. It doesn't feel like a gift, it never does. That's what makes it real. They stood in silence for a while, surrounded by graves. The Coalition is changing, Yuna said eventually. Some species are starting to rebuild their military forces. Not like ours, but more than they had. They're realizing that peace requires strength. Is that a good thing? Ji-won asked. I don't know. But it's honest. For 400 years, the Coalition built a civilization on denial. You denied that evil exists, that some beings will take what they want by force, that peace sometimes requires the willingness to fight. Now you're facing reality, and you're helping us do it. Yes, because despite everything, we still believe in what the Coalition could be, a place where different species work together, where conflicts are resolved peacefully when possible. We just think that when possible is an important qualifier. Ji-won looked across the cemetery at all the graves. 370 people, 370 families who had lost someone, 370 lives traded for millions of others saved. Thank you, she whispered. And I'm sorry we made you into monsters. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, We're not monsters, Captain. We're just human. And being human means protecting those who can't protect themselves, even when it costs us everything. As the sun set over Earth, casting long shadows across the graves, Ji-won understood something fundamental. The galaxy had begged for mercy and humanity had answered, not with words or treaties or proper procedure, but with blood and fire and sacrifice. They had called the humans monsters. But monsters don't weep over graves. Monsters don't honor their dead. Monsters don't fight to protect strangers. The Terrans weren't monsters. They were something far more dangerous and far more valuable. They were warriors who still remembered why they fought. They were soldiers who understood